Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess, and a little update about me. Um, after a damn near 3.5 week break off of school, I'm not quite sure what to do with myself because I am starting school again tomorrow. So it's been a while. Gonna have to get back on that discipline game. But with that said, I don't think I mentioned on the last few podcasts, but I recorded them on the road. I was back in Ohio with family, seeing some friends, and did Christmas and New Year's, and I saw all the people I wanted to see, and got to spend some time with people that mean a lot to me. So ultimately, I think with the holidays, that's really all you can hope for, and just cherishing those moments, I think, something I'm pretty grateful for. And, now I'm back in Dallas. Made it back late last night. There's a lot I could say about the road trip. I'll just say that I love road trips. They're very meditative. And one particular stop on the road trip, I did make several, like three pretty important ones, but I'm only going to share one with you today. So pretty much the middle of the trip, I stopped in Memphis, Tennessee. And as I've done in the past, I've been to Memphis like 4 or 5 times on these road trips. And for, I think, 2019 USA Weightlifting Nationals. And I think pretty much every time I've gone to the Lorraine Motel and the National Civil Rights Museum, but I've never gone in. And for one reason or another, maybe they weren't open. I don't think I checked if they were open. It wasn't something that I was seeking out for one reason or another. I could say, I think just growing up and learning about the atrocities that humanity has inflicted upon itself and each other, learning about slavery in our country and, the resulting segregation and racism and divide is very disturbing to me. I'm someone that I feel my feelings very deeply. I'm very sensitive, and just to hear about the horrors that people went through is something for me that has traditionally made me uncomfortable. And the fact that I am a white male and white men were the ones typically inflicting this pain, I do, even though it wasn't me, I do feel a twinge of guilt. I think there's something to just seeing someone that looks like you doing something that you wouldn't choose yourself, and just witnessing that. It does remind you of your own dark side, which, my dark side would not be into slavery. But we all do have that dark side. So I did a lot of deep, meditation and reflection. I actually went inside the museum this time, it was fantastic. I mean, just learning about these people and their lives, everyone involved with the civil rights, movement. And then kind of the peak of that, kind of right in the middle of the museum, is Martin Luther King, his hotel room, because that's Lorraine Motel is where he was assassinated. So going to that spot, just being in that space, it's pretty thick. It's pretty heavy. I felt the same way when, I've gone to, downtown Dallas where JFK was assassinated. Both, just incredibly, evil acts. And when you're standing in the presence of that, even though it's all these years later, you can't help but feel kind of the thickness of that, if that makes sense. So, but getting to be there and also experiencing the, trying to understand why someone would do something like kill, Martin Luther King Jr. And really it was his light, I mean, he wasn't a perfect person. There's a lot out there about his personal life, but when it mattered, when it came time to give that speech, march on, the mall in Washington and all that, he showed up in a big way. He gave people a lot of hope, throughout, the civil rights movement to that point, and then on after. He definitely lived on as a legend, afterwards, even to this day. And his co-workers is obviously not the right word, but his the brothers of the people that he worked with, in that civil rights movement. Like I said, his brothers have forged on to this day. One person I think of is John Lewis, passed recently, and Martin Luther King may have been that old. He might still be around this day. His wife's still around, his kids are around. So yeah, it just makes you think. And same with John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, all those people that were kind of involved in progress, taken from us at a time when they were much needed. Quote unquote, the conscience of America. It just shows you that dark forces are always at work, and they're out there. So why am I talking about all this? Well, to do great things in life, I personally, I feel like I have, things inside me that I want to do, that I want to express. And there's a bit of hesitation. And a quote from Martin Luther King struck me. And that is, faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. For him, he got involved with the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama, around the time of bus boycotts. And if you know anything about Rosa Parks, or if you don't, definitely look it up, learn more about her and what was going on in Montgomery. But he was only 26, and he was one of the, young leaders as a pastor. He was a leader in the religious community, and he really got involved and met a guy whose name is actually eluding me right now. It was a really... his last name was Rustin. Rustin. I can't remember his first name, but he left a impression on me yesterday at the museum, because he was really the person close to Martin Luther King when he was 26 that, really was pushing the nonviolence kind of movement, or the nonviolence approach, which obviously became integral to Dr. King's process, and then ultimately also made him vulnerable. There's another quote that just came to my mind, and I wasn't prepared for this episode with that quote, but I do like to just go off the cuff when I have a thought like this. But there's a quote that goes something like, the vulnerable among us are often great leaders, but their strength also leaves them open to being destroyed. And that's essentially what happened with Dr. King. And not only him, but JFK, RFK, Medgar Evers, anyone else who was assassinated in that time, or even attempted. And I think personally, that's pretty scary for a guy like me that wants to do good in the world. If I do good, if I execute my vision, there may be people out there that believe the opposite and would potentially use violence, when my aim would be to do so through nonviolent means. So it is this, you can call it good versus evil, but it's just I think more so aggressive versus passive. And passive is kind of a dirty word, because people think it means that you're just waiting around. But I would say Martin Luther King was passive, but he was acting all the time. He was not passive in the sense of he was just waiting at home for something to happen. He was making things happen, but just in a manner that was nonviolent. And when met with violence or resistance, he just stayed calm and did nothing. I think that's more passive. Passive is when you're in that exact moment when you're met with resistance. So, taking it back to faith, it's something I know for sure I haven't always had. It's been hard for me to see the good in negative situations. And in life, we're going to be presented with many negative situations. I've said before on this podcast that I think life is about 50% good and bad. And again, not to pass judgment, but just things happening for you versus resistance that you face. It's not necessarily good or bad, more so just, are we going forwards or are we going backwards? It's not so much assigning good to one or the other, because 2 steps back could lead to 3 steps forward, or just one. You know what I mean? So I'll say things that have happened to me in 2024 really just put me between a rock and a hard place, where I didn't really have any other choice but to have faith. There's times when you lose faith, where everything seems lost, and that's about the time where, God or the universe or whatever you want to call it, typically can show you the good. They will make an overt things will happen that are just abundantly good, so you literally can't miss it. I'm a little bit thick in the head, so sometimes it's hard for me to see, especially if you're focused on the negative. But when you're focused just on paying attention and you see both the negative and the positive and you kind of weigh them out, you notice that life really is 50-50, and you can appreciate the 50% that's pushing you forward. And then you also come to appreciate the resistance, because oftentimes that resistance comes before a major leap forward. And without these opposite forces in our life, we wouldn't evolve, we wouldn't make progress. And so it sounds very cliche, I guess, to say you got to take the good with the bad, but I think this is a lesson that I've heard said before, but it's something that you have to feel. And I'm realizing in my life, if I look back and meditate on things that have happened, I've been trying so hard to use my willpower to affect the outcome of certain things. And I think there are some things that are within our power, like choices that are ours to make, that willpower is best used on. Things that are within our control and actually under our control. Like when you try to expand your circle of influence, you can sometimes bring outside things under your control, but that's a fleeting control. It's not real. And the things that are really under your control will always be under your control. And I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is, really, if you can boil it down to one thing that's always under your control, and it is choice. In any given moment, you may have 2 or more choices. Almost always. And one choice that's always available to you is to do nothing and to be nonviolent, be quote unquote passive. Just let people do things. The earth is having an issue. Say there's like a hurricane, that's nothing that anyone can stop. And we might think that we can develop science that can stop it, but it's genuinely force of nature. So all you can do is get the hell out of the way or batten down the hatches. So that's a pretty overstated example, but I think we overestimate our influence on outcomes of things. And that's not to say that our choice isn't powerful. I think that's where people lose hope is they say, okay, well, my choice doesn't mean much, so, what's the point? And I think I've been there for a very long time in that exact spot, the nihilism. And what I can say is your choice, as small as we are in this universe, your choice is powerful and it is precious. And it's the only thing you really have always. You may have other choices offered to you at certain times, but really, that one choice is always available to you. And oftentimes, the other choice, if it's just a binary, will be to persist in a goal that you feel strongly about. It's aligned with your values. It's something that you're working towards. And so aiming at the highest possible goal that you can see and understand is advisable. And just know too that sometimes you don't see the ultimate outcome. So what's coming you might be excited about, but trying to kind of make the future more cooperative will only lead to suffering. Now I feel like I'm just preaching here, so I'm going to make it a little bit interesting. Recently I watched a movie again, probably for like the 30th time. This is something I just put on in the background before, like, if I'm seeing someone and they're like super into it, it's pretty easy to get people to watch Henry Cavill. But yeah, Man of Steel is the origin story of Superman. Is one of my favorite movies of all time, just the way it portrays Superman. And it's not afraid of leaning into the dark themes, as well as the good qualities of Superman. So there's a moment in the movie where the antagonist, General Zod, shows up at Earth and threatens Earth and says, give me Superman or else, and they don't want to find out what or else is. And Superman walks into a church, and this is really interesting to me because he knows he's an alien now. He knows where he comes from. He has enough information to know that, like, this human religion made up and perpetuated by human beings that are, flawed. They built this place, and he's just looking for a little bit of faith, looking for a little bit of, influence. I mean, he's like trusting someone to influence his decision, and he goes to the church, and there's a preacher in there. And he basically says, like, hey, I can't trust General Zod. Don't think I can trust humanity either. What should I do? And the preacher basically breaks it down and just says, like, okay, so you can't trust either side. Who is more likely to come around? And it's like, at this point, General Zod can't be negotiated with. He's a, maniac. And humans are nearly just as scary just based on what he has to lose. But the preacher goes, basically, like, sometimes you just got to take a leap of faith and the trust comes later. And I can tell you from experience, this is something I did this year. I won't say the exact context, but I did take sort of a leap of faith, a situation where I kind of had some intuition on, what might happen. Didn't necessarily feel ready to handle it. But I could feel this is something that was worth my time. Something that I ultimately wish would have kind of shaken out my way. But, from where I started 2024 and started this podcast and, the places I've been, to get put in that situation, be faced with, a pretty massive amount of fear, and to just choose to take a leap of faith, even though I kind of knew where it might be heading. I think is just a commitment to the path of growth. And if you find something in life that's worth giving a shot, you got to give it a shot. And this thing was definitely worth it. And at the end of the day, it didn't work out in my favor, but now I know when I'm faced with other situations in life, I'm going to have the confidence to take a leap of faith, even though I know that it could be incredibly painful for me if it doesn't work out. So yeah, so Superman ends up doing that, taking the leap of faith, kind of trust in humanity, and it's an ongoing relationship. Luckily, he is powerful enough to kind of keep them, it's, mutually assured destruction, except they can't really destroy him. Although, that's a sequel. But he gets to the end with General Zod. Everything else is taken care of. He's just one-on-one with, his dark side, so to speak. General Zod's kind of the worst of Krypton, and he's the best of it. And they're fighting, and I'm going to end this with something that I think about a lot. And I think for a long time, the reason I've been scared of the dark side of humanity and myself is when you deal with it in either yourself or in other people, there's a massive chance that you can get kind of pulled down to that level. And not to say that I'm above anyone or anything, or even myself, the darker parts of myself, but again, like, we all have a choice to make, and I choose more often than not to do good in this world. Definitely not flawless at this, but getting better by the day, and again, like, choosing faith and courage and good over evil when I can. But so yeah, he faces his ultimate dark side. It comes down to a moment where he's kind of got General Zod in a headlock, and the guy's got his heat vision pointed at people and trying to kind of burn them alive. And Superman is forced in that moment to snap his neck, which is kind of shocking, because he's definitely, although he does use violence, he only uses it against those who are, threatening the existence of people or things, and threatening, self-respect, ability to hold space in this world. So, in a way, the thing that Zod did was kind of brought him down to Zod's level by forcing him to kill him. And I think this is an inexcusable offense, purely because of the situation and the direct harm of other people kind of being in on the table there. But it obviously affects him. So I think the last thing I'll say is, and this is something I worked on last year and into this year, but when you do take a leap of faith and you do ultimately get disappointed or run into a particularly evil scenario, and you can feel it, it kind of pulled you in, made you do some things that you weren't so proud of. Being able to forgive yourself for that is huge. Just know that, you're a human being, and it is a part of all of us, and someone, clearly wasn't able to make the right choice for themselves, and they wanted you to, make that choice with them. And at the end of the day, that's really all we have. That there's something that you always have, is just the ability to say, no, I choose otherwise. I choose to persist and not give in. So I think a scenario like Superman definitely gotta, forgive himself for having to kill General Zod. But again, that was like the last of his kind. It's pretty heavy stuff in his case. And it obviously affects him later. But for me, I know in the past I've been awful at forgiving myself for my shortcomings. And my shortcomings, the situation I mentioned, my shortcomings definitely came forward, as I kind of knew they would. I just didn't know how, when, where, why, and wasn't paying enough attention to, kind of deal with it before it came up. And I think that's what I did over this last break, was really genuinely forgive myself, which now gives a clear runway to move forward. Right now, there's a new trimester coming. 2025 is going to be a great year, full of new goals, some old goals, new people, a couple old people. But the table's all set. It's kind of like a new chessboard. So really, it's just time to pick a strategy and get going. And I thought this was an appropriate message for the first of the year. And going into this year, 2025 is going to be year of faith. Just faith that my path, my efforts, what I'm doing is going to add up to that little speck of value that I have to offer the world. It's all I got, and it's important. If we all offer that, the world's going to be a better place. So I hope you will join me, offer yours up with me, and yeah, that's the episode for today. So I would just end by asking yourself, where can you take a leap of faith? Is there something that lights you up, kind of sets you on fire, motivates you, and you just haven't pulled the trigger because of fear or some other emotion? You may not do it perfect, but you might be really surprised with the results. And I think at the end of the day, that's all we can do, is do what's required and accept the outcome. So here's to accepting the outcome and forgiving ourselves if things don't shake out our way. Until next time, I'll see you guys.